This is Sony's FX5. It's not a long anticipated camera, as it's a totally new model that sits between the FX3 and FX6, although it's a much more advanced camera than the 5.5-year-old FX6. Okay to get a shot. It's being dubbed by many as the Baby Venice 2. I can see why. But actually, it is a long-anticipated camera because in many ways it's pretty much everything that was hoped for from an FX3 Mark II in a nearly identical body. So much so that I really have no idea if the just over 5-year-old FX3 will ever get a Mark II. I think there's actually more chance of an A7S4 than an FX3 II now, but mind you, that's probably not going to happen either. This review isn't sponsored. Sony loaned me the camera for a short time and it's long gone, which actually makes editing much harder since you can't check things. There's also no sponsor integration, so if you do find this review useful, if you could consider using the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description or the thanks button below the video, it would really help me out. So thank you. There's a lot that I really love about the FX5, but there's definitely things which I wish they'd done differently, and there's quite a few quirks and some irritations. Most of them are around the user interface. I will try to cover as many as possible, but I'm sure I'll miss some. There's some great hardware decisions, but there's also ones which have baffled me, but I'll get onto those later in the video. The camera that I tested is a pre-production model with beta firmware, so things may well change in the release version, and from what I've seen, they have. It also has a key feature that isn't due to be in the camera until the version 2 firmware, which is due out next summer. And I'll remind you with a graphic on the screen when I'm showing footage in this mode. The headline features are internal RAW, open gate, triple base ISO, dual gain, 4K at 240 frames per second. There's also 32-bit float audio, but only with the XLR handle, a bigger and brighter LCD screen with full vari-angle, increasing from 3 inches to 3.5 inches. And to some of us, that half-inch makes a difference. And there's also an optional and quite wonderful tilting EVF that's removable. Now it is going to get a bit confusing as I go into the details of some of these new features, especially the frame rates, the codecs and resolutions, but I'll try and keep it as clear as possible. The FX5 has a new 16.6 megapixel fully stacked sensor with a resolution of 5K. We now have a triple base ISO, 800, 4000 and 12800. This is most welcome as the jump from the low and high base of the FX3, A7S3 and FX6 was always a bit much. So having a middle 4000 is very nice. On top of this, there's a dual gain mode which increases the dynamic range in the shadows, although this is limited to the base ISO of 800. In Cine EI mode, you can push the exposure index up to 3200 ISO, or in flexible ISO mode, you can just shoot at 3200, although I believe in the production firmware, this is 6400. If you're in regular video modes with dual gain turned on, you can shoot up to 60 frames per second, and in open gate up to 30 frames per second. Yes, it's finally here. Sony has added open gate 3x2. And in the triple base ISO mode, you can shoot up to 5K 60p in it, but currently only in RAW. With version 2 firmware, this will increase to 120 frames per second, and there is no crop. Are you following all of this? And also with version 2 firmware, you'll be able to shoot in 4K open gate XAVC. We can shoot up to 120 frames per second in 4K 16:9 and 17:9 with the XAVC codecs, and in RAW up to 5K 60 frames per second, again increasing to 120 frames per second with the version 2 firmware. Also in that firmware is the really important 4K 240 frames per second mode, which has a crop of around 1.3 times. This is only in RAW. You'll see a lot of footage in this video shot in this 240 frames per second, as it's so glorious. It's a world away from the terrible 240 frames per second HD mode that we've had in Sony cameras for so many years. It's just a shame that it won't be part of the camera until that version 2 firmware comes out, which currently is slated as a year away. I hope they bring it forward. When you're shooting in variable frame rate mode, which is like the old S&Q setting, no audio is recorded. But if you set your base frame rate higher, then you can set it up to 120p in most modes, and then you do get audio. You just need to slow it down in post. In variable frame rate mode, it really should be recording a separate audio WAV file, just like many other cameras have done for years. Before we move on from the 4K 240 frames per second, I thought it's important to show you what we had before in this frame rate from Sony cameras. This shot is from the FX6, which is the same quality that you'll get in the A7S III, FX3 and ZVE1. It's 1080p, soft and heavily line skipped. And when you compare it to the FX5, the difference is of course huge. This looks as good as the normal frame rate footage. I do have a couple of other cameras that shoot in 4K 240 frames per second. GoPro's excellent Mission 1 Pro's image is very nice and natural looking. With obvious quality drops, you can go higher to 480 frames per second continuous in 1080p and 960 frames per second in a 10-second burst mode, but that one's quite soft. DJI's Pocket Phone 4P can do 4K 240 frames per second, and it's very good, but because it's only in their normal color profile, not D-Log, it looks too overprocessed for me. I do hope they do a firmware update to give this mode log. The FX5's 4K 240p is easily the best looking footage I've seen in this frame rate, and because you have the triple base ISO with it, it makes it possible to use it in many more situations than you would normally. If you want to go higher, well, you're going to need to get a dedicated high-speed camera, like the superb Pixboom Spark, which shoots in 4K up to 1000 frames per second, and 2K up to 2000 frames per second. Make sure you check out my review of the beta camera from last year. I have the production one now, so I'll start shooting a follow-up soon. It's a little bit confusing when selecting your shooting mode, as it lists them as imager modes rather than record modes. So if you want to record that full 5K, you need to be in RAW. With the XAVC codecs, it oversamples the 5K down to 4K. You may have noticed that the RAW video shots are slightly wider than the XAVC ones. I think this is because first off, RAW doesn't support lens corrections, and it's possible that I had the breathing compensation mode turned on accidentally, which again isn't supported in RAW. And this crops the image by up to 10% depending on the lens. There's also two 4.5K modes called FFC, which have a nearly 10% crop, but it appears to be the only modes in which you can output RAW via HDMI. There is a Super 35mm mode, but because there aren't enough pixels for 4K, it works out to be around 3.3K. But you can't actually record this, only oversampled down to 1080p in XAVC. You might be able to get away with the 3.8 crop mode, which is mostly there for the 4K 240 frames per second. But it could work with Super 35mm and APS-C lenses as long as they aren't too wide. Okay, so let's talk about the internal RAW, the first camera below the £25,000 Burano to have it. It has the same X-OCN LT codec as the Burano, which is also in the Venice 2, but it also includes two new compression modes, X-OCN C1 and C2. I use C2 for almost all of my RAW recordings, as it looks fantastic, and has a bitrate about the same as the highest recording mode in the FX3, which is XAVC SI, and that's less than half the size of standard ProRes 422 and around 1/5 the size of the Nikon ZR's R3D NE. This is a big selling point, as aside from Blackmagic's very good B-RAW, the internal RAW of most cameras have super high bit rates, which given today's media costs is a huge problem. When you're not shooting RAW, there's quite a few XAVC codecs, XAVC SI, SL422 and SL420, all are 10-bit and H.264. Now there is an HS H.265 version, but like the alpha cameras, you cannot use it in 25p or 30p. I need 24p, 50p and higher, and I still have no idea why this is the case. You may be asking, why don't you use a high resolution sensor, 6K or 7K? Because then you get even sharper oversampled video, and you have enough pixels for 4K Super 35, like we have on the excellent A7 IV. I'm sure a major reason is not wanting to lose the low-light performance that we have in the FX3, A7S3 and FX6. But also, and this hasn't been officially confirmed, but I have a very, very reliable source who told me that the sensor isn't really new. It's the same one that's in the A7R6. Yes, the 66.8 megapixel sensor. But the FX5 one is listed as 16.6 megapixels. The A7R6's 4 pixels are 9,984 by 6,656, which if combined 2 by 2 to make larger pixels becomes 4,992 by 3,328, which is the full resolution of the FX5 sensor. It also makes sense as the A7R6 sensor also has a dual gain mode and really impressive rolling shutter performance. Gerald Undone sort of came out of retirement briefly to do some tests with the FX5. Gerald, it's time to wake up. His results for the rolling shutter speed are really impressive, even better than the impressive A7R6's. Make sure you check out his video, it's a nice epilogue to his camera review career. The FX5 doesn't have every feature that we've seen in the latest alphas, but it has the most important ones, and also has the superb Bionz XR processor with the integrated AI autofocus unit. And as expected, because of this, the autofocus is superb. It has the main subject detection modes, but it doesn't have the insect, plane or car options from the other cameras. This isn't an issue for me. I need human, animal and bird detection. Something the FX3, A7S3 and FX6 don't have. With the IBIS, we have our normal standard active and the dynamic active, which I use a lot when handheld. Yes, it has quite a crop when using it, but the results are worth it. In RAW though, you can only use standard IBIS. Also in RAW, you can't use clear image zoom. I love this function, and thankfully, just like in the FX6 and more recent cameras, autofocus is still fully functional. We now have more options for anamorphic desqueeze, but just like we have with the FX3, it turns off all stabilisation and autofocus. And there's now some decent anamorphic lenses with autofocus, so I really hope they can fix this. Now you do need a different algorithm for IBIS with anamorphic lenses because of the stretch. Panasonic have had a dedicated anamorphic IBIS mode in their Lumix cameras for pretty much longer than I've been alive, as well as a lot of video functionality that Sony users have been begging for years. But with the FX5, I've had pretty decent results when turning off desqueeze and using the Sony IBIS, and setting the focal length in the lens menu to the lens focal length divided by the squeeze factor. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. With the FX5 having open gate 3x2, it opens the camera up for higher anamorphic squeeze factors. So it would be great if they could improve the anamorphic capabilities of the FX5. Looking at the body, it's very similar to the FX3, a little bit chunkier. At the top, the main differences are the placement of the quarter 20s, there's the EVF mount connection at the top there, and the rear dial, which is now on top. This is called the multi-function dial. On the left-hand side, there's now an Ethernet port. The mic and headphone ports are now no longer behind the flap. And there's now 2 USB-Cs, one of which is for fast transfer, the other for power delivery. But you could use one of them for the new timecode cable. On the bottom, we now have 2 quarter 20s for a much more secure tripod quick-release plate attachment. The battery compartment is different because the FX5 uses the new batteries introduced with the A7R6. But battery life is very good. I was shooting with 3 batteries and I didn't use them all up with a full day of filming. The grip side is much the same, with the media ports again taking SD cards or CF Express Type A. At the rear, because of the FX5's larger screen, we've lost the dial and 4 shortcuts. There's now a dedicated home button for the big 6 screen, as well as one for the user shortcuts. The playback button is now called Clips and is next to the new location for shortcut 4. I don't know why they hard labeled them as such a specific function, as most people will get to reprogram them to something else. I mean, I did. There's no mode button now. That's because there is no stills function in this camera. You cannot take photos in any way. And I find this is one of the biggest disappointments for me. It doesn't make any sense. It seems like a very simple thing to add. I mean, the camera's got a shutter button on it, which if you don't use it for stills, it's just limited to a third record button, which you need 3, or a shot marker as 1 and 2. That's all you can use it for. I do hope this is something that they can rectify in firmware. This fantastic tilting EVF isn't included, and I don't think it's being sold as a package. Whilst it's not cheap, I do think it's essential. Only having the LCD isn't enough. Yes, it is brighter and bigger than before, but still not big or bright enough. And it doesn't make you shoot lower than you should. I just hope that this EVF will be compatible with future cameras. There is an obvious downside though. It sits right in the centre of the camera, right over Sony's excellent MI shoe. And they use that for their MI shoe mics. And of course, it totally stops you putting on the new XLR handle. The tilting EVF of the FX2 is on the left-hand side and is not removable. Plus, you can't actually tilt it up when a mic's attached, but at least you can still attach a mic with it there, or attach the XLR handle. I've asked for an EVF like this countless times, and now they've finally done it. But of course, I'm still not happy. That would make things too easy. There could be a solution. Perhaps they could make a cable extension for it. You'd need a cage to attach it, but really you need a cage for this camera. Same with the FX3. The 1/4-20 mounting points is not enough, and they're not in the right places. I hope they do it. I didn't actually use the XLR handle, as the EVF was on the camera the whole time. The biggest difference between this and the FX3 one is it now supports 32-bit float audio. There's a 32-bit float audio setting in the camera that you can enable, although it will only work when this XLR handle is attached. I would love to see 32-bit float recording for all other mics, including those connected via the 3.5mm jack. This is one of the nicest things that Nikon have put in their ZR. The thing I dislike the most about the FX5 is the UI. They're using the menu system from the FX6, Burano and Venice 2, which of course makes a lot of sense. The problem is, it's a pain in the arse to use. I definitely do prefer the Alpha system that's in the FX3, but you'll get used to it. It's just if you're going to be using both these cameras on a shoot, it's really going to do your head in, as they are so totally different to operate. I also can't assign everything that I would like to shortcuts, and even the dials. And the main thing is I can't assign shutter speed to either the front or the multifunction wheel. I can set both of those to ISO for some reason, but not shutter speed. So changing your shutter speed is actually quite fiddly. But there are positives to it. It opens up features that we are missing in the alphas. Things like the ability to set your noise reduction and even turn it off, as well as having the LCD screen stay on when outputting to HDMI with the menu screens on the display, just like the FX6 can. But I do really miss the FN quick menu from the alphas. The user screen is very nice, but you can only add 6 functions to it. One of the things which annoys me the most about the camera is the constant rebooting. Whenever you need to change your base frame rate, or you need to go into RAW, switch between that and XAVC, it reboots. And I change my base frame rate a lot from 25 to 50p or 100p because I want slow motion with audio. Very frustrating. I don't remember the FX6 doing this. The playback mode, which you go into by pressing the clips button, is still as bad as the FX6 one. The system in the FX3 and Alphas is great. This is not. There's no on-screen scrubbing, and you have to be in the same codec or frame rate to play a clip back. Frustrating. The display itself on the LCD and the EVF is very nice and clean, much better than the Alpha display. It has everything you want on screen without getting in the way, and it has things that the Alpha display is missing. There's things like the priority setting that you're on when shooting in autofocus. One thing I haven't talked about is low light performance. For me, I think it's now the low light king, taking the crown from the FX6. It's cleaner at the high base of 12,800, and you can go higher in S-Log3 all the way up to 409,600 compared to the 160,000 of the FX6. Both the FX5 and FX6 can turn off noise reduction or set it to low, medium or high. The FX3 and the Alphas cannot. They add noise reduction once you go past the high base, and it never looks as good as when you do it in post with Neat Video 6. There's still a huge amount for me to get my head around with the FX5. It's a really complicated camera, but as it's gone back, that will have to wait for another day. Price-wise, it's more expensive than the FX3 was at launch, but cheaper than the FX6. Despite my frustrations with certain things, I do think this is Sony's best video camera that they've made. It's really just missing the internal variable ND and the professional connections. So maybe we'll have an FX6 Mark II at some point. But for me, I love this form factor so much more, especially when using it with the tilting EVF. It's just so nice to shoot with, and the results are simply gorgeous.